Alice, the Forgetful Fate Book 1. Prologue. A hush fell over the cavernous space as Alice, a striking figure with flowing green hair and enigmatic green eyes, stepped into the light. Her voice, a mesmerizing blend of honey and steel, echoed through the gathering. "We are at a crossroads, my friends," she began, her voice low and deliberate. "A crossroads where shadows loom and truths are veiled. For too long, we have been shackled by a false peace, a peace built on lies and deceit." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some exchanged nervous glances, while others, drawn by her magnetic presence, leaned forward with rapt attention. Hope, a fragile flame, flickered in their eyes, but it was a hope tempered by fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of the consequences of defiance. Hidden among the crowd, a cloaked figure watched Alice intently. Desi, an elven woman of ancient lineage, with flaming red hair hidden beneath her hood and golden eyes that shimmered like the sun, was a sight to behold. She was slight and not very tall, her porcelain skin contrasting with the rough texture of her cloak. She had journeyed far, seeking answers, her heart aching for the lost, including her friend Cardi, the wise and courageous centaur. In the back of the cavern, a group of centaurs, their powerful forms blending seamlessly with the shadows, listened with heavy hearts. They were a motley crew, outlaws and misfits, united by a common cause. Their eyes, filled with sorrow and longing, mirrored the despair of the crowd. They had come seeking answers, seeking justice for their missing friend, Cardi. "I am Alice," she continued, her voice rising, "a name that has been whispered in the darkest corners of the realm. A name that has been feared and revered. A name that will soon be spoken with reverence and awe." A low growl echoed from the back of the cavern. A burly dwarf, his beard a tangle of fire and frustration, stepped forward. "Enough of your theatrics, Faye," he bellowed, his voice a mix of fear and defiance. "Y'all and Elliot have brought us peace. They have protected us from the chaos that once consumed this realm." The crowd stirred, a collective gasp rippling through the cavern. Fear and anger mingled in their hearts. They knew the truth, the terrible truth, of what happened to those who dared to speak ill of Y'all and his family. They had seen the disappearances, the empty homes, the chilling silence. Yet, in Alice's eyes, they saw a flicker of hope, a spark of defiance. Her words, like a balm to their wounded souls, soothed their fears and ignited their anger. They were tired of living in the shadow of fear, of being mere puppets in Y'all's grand scheme. Alice's voice, a clarion call, echoed through the cavern. "Peace," she scoffed, her voice dripping with contempt. "A fragile peace, built on the backs of the oppressed and the forgotten. A peace that will crumble like dust beneath our feet." She paused, her gaze locking onto the dwarfs. "You speak of Y'all and Elliot as saviors, but I see them as tyrants. They have stolen our birthright, imprisoned our kin, and condemned us to a future of servitude." A hush fell over the crowd as they hung onto her every word. "But no longer," Alice declared, her voice rising to a crescendo. "No longer will we cower in the shadows. No longer will we be pawns in their twisted game. We will rise, united and defiant. We will reclaim our destiny, and we will overthrow the tyrants who have held us captive." A surge of energy pulsed through the cavern. The travelers, their hearts aflame with hope and defiance, began to stir. They were no longer mere spectators, but a force to be reckoned with. A new era was dawning, an era of courage, of rebellion, and of ultimate victory. Chapter 1. The scent of warm gingerbread and simmering love potions filled the air as Alice and Charles weaved through the bustling kitchens of the Fey realm. Towering ovens, carved with intricate runes, roared with enchanted flames, while bubbling cauldrons, overflowing with iridescent liquids, hissed and sputtered. Shelves, laden with jars of shimmering powders and dried herbs that shimmered with an inner light, lined the cavernous walls. The kitchen witches, with their dark, flowing hair and eyes that sparkled like stardust, worked with a rhythmic precision, their laughter and the clinking of enchanted cookware creating a symphony of sound. "Careful with that dragon-scale dust, Willow." Brenda, the head kitchen witch, a formidable woman with raven hair streaked with silver and eyes as black as the night sky, called out across the room. "One sneeze and we'll have a firestorm in here." Willow, a young witch with a mischievous glint in her eyes, giggled. "Don't worry, Brenda. I've got it under control." She winked at Alice and Charles as she carefully measured out the shimmering powder. Besides, she added with a grin, a little firestorm might spice things up around here. Brenda chuckled, shaking her head. Just try not to burn the cauldron, dear. That last one took me a month to scrub clean. Alice and Charles, with their wild, untamed spirits, were right at home amidst the enchanting disarray. Willow, is that a new batch of giggle grass cookies I smell? Alice asked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. It is indeed, Willow replied, offering them a warm cookie. Fresh out of the oven. Be careful, though, one bite and you'll be laughing for hours. Charles snatched a cookie and took a large bite. Bring it on, he said, his mouth already curving into a grin. I could use a good laugh. They'd grown up in this world of magic and wonder, their childhood a tapestry woven with laughter, mischief, and endless exploration. They'd spent countless hours climbing ancient trees, their laughter echoing through the leaves, swimming in crystal-clear lakes, their bodies shimmering with iridescent scales, and chasing fireflies through the twilight forest, their footsteps leaving trails of sparkling dust. Their days were a whirlwind of adventure, filled with daring escapades and fantastical tales. One day, as they were exploring the Whispering Woods, a place where the trees themselves gossiped and giggled, they stumbled upon a hidden clearing bathed in an ethereal glow. In the center stood an ancient oak, its gnarled branches reaching towards the sky like gnarled fingers. As they approached, a wave of warmth and love washed over them. A voice, clear as a bell, resonated within their minds, "My children, my sweet Alice, my naughty Charles." It was the tongueless one, their mother, communicating through the ancient magic of the oak. Though she had no tongue to speak, her thoughts flowed into their minds like a gentle stream, carrying with them the wisdom of the ages. "My sweet babes," she'd murmur, "the forest holds many secrets, but the greatest secret is the love that binds us all. Mother, we found a hidden grotto behind the waterfall," Charles had excitedly shared with her one day. "A grotto, you say? What wonders did you find within?" The tongueless one's voice was filled with amusement. "Crystals that sing," Alice chimed in. "And a family of pixies who paint with moonlight." Their friendship with the kitchen witch's children was as strong as any familial bond. They'd shared secrets, dreams, and countless adventures. Together, they'd learned the art of brewing potent potions, the magic of baking the perfect loaf of bread, and the secrets of the ancient Fey recipes. They'd spent countless hours concocting potions that could turn frogs into princes, brew love potions that could melt the coldest heart, and create healing salves that could mend any wound. "Hey, Ilara," Charles called out to a young witch with fiery red hair, "remember that time we tried to make a potion of invisibility and ended up turning ourselves into squirrels?" Ilara burst out laughing. "How could I forget? We spent the whole day scampering through the trees, trying to avoid the palace guards." One particular memory stood out in Alice's mind. It was a moonlit night, and they had sneaked into the kitchen to bake a midnight feast. As they stirred the batter for a cake infused with starlight and sprinkled with laughter, they shared stories and dreams, their voices mingling with the crackling of the enchanted fire. They had baked a loaf of bread so large that it could feed an army of sprites, and a cake so sweet that it could bring joy to even the grumpiest of goblins. "This frosting is divine," Alice exclaimed, licking a spoonful of the creamy mixture. "Let's add some extra sparkle," Charles suggested, reaching for a jar of shimmering sugar crystals. Charles, ever the storyteller, perched on a countertop, regaling his friends with tales of his adventures in the celestial realm. He spoke of the time he had tricked a group of mischievous sprites into believing he could turn lead into gold, only to lead them on a wild goose chase through the celestial gardens, their peals of laughter echoing through the heavens. He also recounted the time he had accidentally summoned a tempest while trying to impress a group of water nymphs, sending them scattering for cover amidst a torrent of shimmering rain. "And then," Charles continued, his voice rising with excitement, "I rode a unicorn through a rainbow." His friends erupted in laughter. "You're making that up," Ilara exclaimed. "I am not," Charles retorted, his eyes twinkling. "It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen." Trent, a young fay with silver wings tucked neatly beneath his tunic and a mop of white blonde hair, sat quietly observing the scene. He was a foster child in Yal's care, a serious and studious boy who dreamed of one day becoming a fate, a powerful being who could shape destinies. For now, he was content to learn the ways of the gods and the Fae, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. He watched Alice and Charles with a mixture of admiration and envy, longing for the day he could join their wild adventures. One day, he whispered to himself, "I'll have stories like that to tell." As they grew older, their bond with the kitchen witches deepened. They learned the importance of community, the power of friendship, and the magic that can be found in the simplest of things. They knew that the kitchen was more than just a place to prepare food. It was the heart of the Fae realm, a place where magic was born and dreams were nurtured. Chapter 2. The grand halls of Heaven's palace shimmered with 1,000 iridescent lights, the air alive with music and laughter. Tonight, the graduating class celebrated their ascension, their laughter echoing off the marble pillars and vaulted ceilings. Alice and Charles, hand in hand, navigated the throng of celestial beings, their eyes wide with wonder. "It's like stepping into a dream," Alice whispered, her green hair catching the light like spun emeralds. "More like a fairy tale," Charles corrected, his auburn hair a fiery halo in the shimmering light. "Just look at that fountain. It's made of pure starlight." Their eyes were drawn to a figure standing near the stage, radiating an almost unbearable charisma. Elliot, with his midnight black hair and eyes like amethyst fire, was the epitome of divine beauty. Beside him stood Tyron, the fate god, his shockingly white hair and silver wings a stark contrast to Elliot's dark allure. "He's even more breathtaking in person," Alice breathed, a touch of awe in her voice. Charles, ever protective, felt a prickle of unease. "Don't get too close," he warned, his voice low. "There's something about him, something not quite right." But Alice was already captivated. Elliot, sensing her attention, turned, his gaze locking with hers across the crowded hall. The world seemed to tilt, the music fading as their eyes met. A smile, both seductive and predatory, curved his lips. "Excuse me, brother," Charles muttered, pulling Alice away with a determined tug. "We need to find Cardi." Weaving through the crowd, they spotted Cardi, his golden brown skin gleaming in the light, surrounded by a boisterous group of friends. He was laughing, his hazel eyes sparkling with mischief, but a shadow crossed his face as he caught sight of Tyron deep in conversation with a figure shrouded in darkness. "What's wrong?" Alice asked, noticing the shift in his demeanor. Cardi forced a smile. "Nothing. Just palace politics." But his eyes held a troubled glint. He knew Tyron. He knew the darkness that lurked beneath that serene facade. And he knew, with a chilling certainty, that whatever Tyron was plotting, it boded ill for the realm. Meanwhile, Elliot, with a grace that belied his predatory nature, approached Alice and Charles. "May I introduce myself?" he purred, his voice a silken caress. "Elliot, at your service." He bowed low, taking Alice's hand and pressing a lingering kiss to her knuckles. Alice blushed, flustered by his attention. "Alice," she stammered, "and this is my brother, Charles." "Charmed," Elliot replied, his gaze never leaving Alice. "You are even more radiant than I imagined." Charles scowled. "We should really be going," he said, trying to steer Alice away. But Elliot was not easily deterred. "Nonsense," he insisted, his voice laced with charm. "Stay a while. The night is young." As they chatted, Celeste, Elliot's mother, watched them from afar. Her eyes, cold and calculating, missed nothing. She saw in Alice not an ally, but a conduit, a vessel of immense power waiting to be exploited. She would bind Alice to Elliot, enslave her to their will, and use her power to reshape the heavens in their image. In the shadows, Tyron continued his conversation with the mysterious figure. "Everything is proceeding as planned," he murmured. "The Fae goddess is under our spell." The figure chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down Cardi's spine. "Excellent. Soon, the universe will tremble before us." As the night wore on, the palace thrummed with an undercurrent of tension, a silent battle waged beneath the surface of celebration. Alice and Charles, oblivious to the dark forces swirling around them, laughed and danced, their hearts light with the promise of a new beginning. But the shadows were closing in, and their carefree innocence would soon be shattered. Chapter 3. The World Tree, a colossal sentinel of iridescent bark and leaves that shimmered with trapped starlight, pulsed with a life force that echoed through every corner of Heaven's palace. Crystal waterfalls, defying gravity, cascaded from floating islands, their waters alive with luminous fish that swam through the air as easily as they did water. Groves of whispering trees, their branches laden with glowing fruit, hummed with an ancient magic. This wasn't just a palace, but a realm of infinite possibility, a place where the laws of nature danced in harmony with celestial whims. Alice, her green hair catching the light like spun starlight, chased a mischievous sprite through a field of moonflowers, their petals unfurling in her wake. "Catch me if you can, Charles," she giggled, her laughter echoing through the crystalline groves. Charles, ever the competitive twin, grinned. "Oh, I will," he called back, his auburn hair a fiery streak against the pastel landscape. He sprinted after her, his laughter mingling with hers, a symphony of youthful joy. But their carefree revelry was a stark contrast to the tension-gripping Carty. Hidden beneath the sprawling branches of a weeping willow, he stood frozen, his hazel eyes wide with a mixture of horror and disbelief. He had just witnessed his eldest brother, Advin, his face concealed behind an ornate mask, engaged in a clandestine meeting with Tyron, the fate god. "The council is ripe for the taking," Advin hissed, his voice a venomous whisper that cut through the tranquil air. "The Fae grow complacent, their power waning. It's time for the gods to reclaim their rightful place." Tyron's reply was a low, guttural chuckle. "Indeed. We will orchestrate a slow, insidious takeover. Plant seeds of doubt, stoke the flames of discontent. The Fae will crumble from within, and we will be there to pick up the pieces." Carty's blood ran cold. He had always known his family harbored a deep-seated resentment towards the Fae, a belief that the gods were the rightful rulers of the cosmos. But this was a calculated plot to dismantle the delicate balance of power, a betrayal of the very foundation upon which the realm was built. A wave of nausea washed over him. He had to warn Alice and Charles, but fear held him back. What if he was wrong? What if he misjudged his brother's intentions? The weight of his family's legacy, the burden of their ambition, pressed down on him like a suffocating shroud. Suddenly, a hand clapped him on the shoulder. "Carty," a familiar voice boomed. "There you are. Mother has been looking for you." Carty whirled around to find Advin standing before him, his mask now gone, replaced with a warm, brotherly smile. "Advin." Carty stammered, his voice betraying his inner turmoil. I was just enjoying the scenery." Advin chuckled, his eyes twinkling. "Always the contemplative one, aren't you? Come on, let's not keep Mother waiting." Carty, his mind reeling, forced a smile and followed his brother, his heart heavy with suspicion and dread. He had to find a way to warn Alice and Charles, but how could he betray his own family, even if their cause was corrupt? As they walked, Advin slid an arm around Carty's shoulders, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know, brother," he said, "great things are on the horizon for our family. We are on the cusp of a new era, an era of unprecedented power and glory." Carty, his stomach churning, managed a weak smile. That's wonderful, Advin." Advin squeezed his shoulder. "Indeed it is. And you, my brother, will play a crucial role in our rise to power." Carty's heart sank. He was trapped, caught between his loyalty to his family and his growing sense of responsibility towards Alice and Charles. He had to make a choice, and the fate of the realm hung in the balance. Meanwhile, Alice and Charles, blissfully unaware of the political machinations swirling around them, stumbled upon a hidden grotto, its entrance veiled by a curtain of cascading vines. Inside, the air shimmered with an otherworldly glow, the walls adorned with luminous crystals that pulsed with an ethereal light. Chapter 4. "It's like stepping into a dream," Alice whispered, her voice filled with awe. Charles, his gaze drawn to a shimmering pool in the center of the grotto, felt a strange pull, a sense of déjà vu. He had seen this place before, in a vision, perhaps, or a forgotten memory. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. Elliot, his amethyst eyes burning with a possessive intensity, approached them with a predatory grace. "Lost, little lambs?" he purred, his voice a silken caress. Alice, startled, felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something about Elliot, a darkness lurking beneath his charm, that both terrified and intrigued her. It was a confusion of emotions, a clash of light and shadow, that mirrored the very conflict brewing within the palace walls. "We were just exploring," Charles replied, his voice tight with suspicion. He felt a surge of protectiveness towards Alice, a primal urge to shield her from Elliot's predatory gaze. Elliot smiled, a slow, seductive curve of his lips. "Exploring, are we? Perhaps I can show you some of the palace's hidden treasures." He reached out, his fingers brushing against Alice's cheek. A jolt of energy, both thrilling and terrifying, surged through her. It was a forbidden fruit, a taste of power and danger that awakened a dormant longing within her. Charles, seeing the look in Elliot's eyes, the hunger that mirrored his own for Carty, stepped forward, placing a protective arm around Alice. "We appreciate the offer," he said, his voice firm, "but we're fine on our own." Elliot's smile faltered, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "As you wish," he said, his voice laced with a thinly veiled threat. "But don't stray too far. The palace can be a dangerous place for the uninitiated." As Elliot disappeared back into the shadows, Charles turned to Alice, his eyes filled with concern. "Stay close," he warned. "I don't trust him." Alice nodded, her heart pounding. She couldn't explain it, but she felt a strange connection to Elliot, a pull that both frightened and excited her. It was a dangerous dance, a cat and mouse game. She was caught in the middle. The days that followed were a whirlwind of classes, explorations, and social gatherings. Alice and Charles, immersed in their new world, found themselves caught in a web of conflicting emotions. They were drawn to the beauty and magic of the palace, yet haunted by a sense of unease, a feeling that something sinister lurked beneath the surface. Charles, his crush on Carty growing with each passing day, found himself torn between his desire for the centaur and his fear of his family's dark agenda. The passion he felt for Carty was a forbidden fire, a dangerous secret that threatened to consume him. Alice, caught between the seductive charm of Elliot and the protective warmth of Charles, struggled to understand the conflicting emotions swirling within her. The lust she felt for Elliot was a dangerous allure, a siren song that threatened to lead her astray. And in the shadows, the game of gods continued, a deadly dance of power and betrayal, with Alice and Charles caught in the crossfire. The crystalline spires of Heaven's Palace shimmered under a sky painted with swirling nebulae, a breathtaking backdrop for the whirlwind of activity that was student life. Alice, Charles, and Carty, now an inseparable trio, navigated the bustling hallways, their laughter echoing amidst the chatter of 1,000 voices. "Did you see that griffin trying to cheat in Transfiguration?" Charles exclaimed, his eyes wide with amusement. "He tried to turn his feathers into gold, but ended up with a beak full of dandelions." Alice giggled, her green hair bouncing with each step. "And that poor nymph in celestial mechanics? She accidentally summoned a meteor shower during her practical exam." Carty, his hazel eyes twinkling, shook his head. "You two have a knack for finding trouble." "Trouble finds us," Charles corrected with a grin, glancing at Carty with a playful glint in his eyes. Their days were filled with a delightful mix of academic challenges and magical mischief. They soared through the air on enchanted broomsticks during flight and maneuver class, brewed potent potions in alchemy, and debated the finer points of interdimensional travel and theoretical physics. Evenings were spent exploring the palace grounds, discovering hidden waterfalls, enchanted groves, and secret libraries filled with ancient scrolls. But amidst the laughter and camaraderie, a storm brewed in Desi's heart. She was hopelessly in love with Elliot, captivated by his charm and the intoxicating power he exuded. He showered her with affection, whisking her away on romantic escapades to starlit meadows and hidden waterfalls. He whispered sweet nothings in her ear, his voice a silken caress that sent shivers down her spine. "You are the most beautiful creature I have ever laid eyes on, Desi," he murmured, his amethyst eyes gazing into hers with an intensity that made her heart flutter. "Your fiery spirit, your unwavering loyalty, you are everything I have ever desired." He had even stolen her innocence, a moment of vulnerability she had shared with no one but Carty. It had been a night of passion and surrender, a whirlwind of emotions that left her breathless and yearning for more. Yet, a nagging doubt gnawed at her heart. She couldn't shake the feeling that Elliot's interest in her was merely a facade, a means to an end. She had overheard whispers, fragments of conversations that hinted at a darker purpose. "He's only using you to get to Alice," a voice whispered in her mind, fueling the flames of insecurity. The thought was like a poisoned arrow, piercing her heart with agonizing doubt. One evening, as Elliot gazed a little too long at Alice during a dinner party, Desi's frustration boiled over. "Must you stare at her like that?" she hissed, her voice laced with jealousy. Elliot turned to her, his brow furrowed in feigned surprise. "What do you mean, darling?" "You know exactly what I mean," Desi retorted, her golden eyes flashing. "The way you look at her, it's like you're devouring her with your eyes." Elliot chuckled, attempting to dismiss her concerns with his usual charm. "Don't be ridiculous, Desi. You're imagining things." "Am I?" Desi challenged, her voice rising. "Or are you just using me to get close to her?" The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Elliot's smile faltered, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "I told you, you're being silly," he said, his voice hardening. "Why would I be interested in Alice when I have you?" He reached for her hand, his touch gentle, but Desi pulled away. "Don't patronize me, Elliot," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "I'm not a fool. I see you look at her. I hear the whispers." Elliot sighed dramatically. "Desi, my love, you are letting your insecurities get the better of you. I adore you. You are the only one who truly matters to me." He pulled her close, his embrace warm and comforting. Desi, desperate to believe him, melted into his arms, her doubts momentarily forgotten. But the seed of suspicion had been planted, and it would continue to grow, casting a shadow over their relationship. Meanwhile, the excitement for the upcoming Fate Ball reached fever pitch. The game, a test of agility, strategy, and sheer daring, was a highlight of the palace calendar. Teams of students, perched precariously on stilts that towered several feet high, would navigate a treacherous obstacle course, dodging electrified traps and razor-sharp wind chimes, all while attempting to capture the opposing team's flag. Alice and Charles, eager to prove their mettle, joined Cardi's team, their competitive spirits ignited. They spent hours practicing, their laughter echoing through the training grounds as they perfected their maneuvers and strategized their attack. "Remember," Cardi instructed, his voice firm but encouraging, "the key is to maintain your balance. Don't let the height intimidate you. Trust your instincts, and trust your teammates." "Don't worry, Cardi," Charles assured him with a wink. "We'll have your back." Alice, her eyes sparkling with determination, nodded in agreement. "We're going to win this." But even as they prepared for the game, the shadow of Tyrant's plot loomed over them, a silent threat that cast a pall over their carefree joy. The Fate Ball wasn't just a game. It was a stage, a battleground where the fate of the realm would be decided. And Alice, unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows, was about to be thrust into the heart of it all.